I'm assuming there must have been a frightening experience, a scary experience. What was that?
No,
No.
actually, I can't think of any experience. I've been scammed in China, but in a pleasant way.
Okay.
Uh, I
Oh,
I've
What is a
been
5,
4,
3.
2.
1.
It's SOSO Jew, and I'm in the building. We in the building. It is the My 5 Cents podcast. Welcome to another episode. Let me introduce the cast of characters. To my bottom, I got HLS.
HLS is here, the self-proclaimed fan favorite. What's up, people?
Oh boy. And the bottom is where he belongs, actually.
Where
He's
he
such a hater.
belongs.
Such
Oh
a
my
hater.
goodness.
Rightful place.
Check the stats.
And to my virtual left, we have the logical genius.
What's up, everybody? It is the logical one, ready for another episode.
Another episode, and welcome to the My 5 Cents podcast, the family debate show where we talk about anything and everything, but we need a loser to laugh at and a winner to take all the bragging rights. How y'all feeling this week, fellas?
I'm good. I'm in need
Not
of
me.
vacation.
I'm not good. I need a vacation. I
Need
need to
a
get
vaca-
away.
Oh my gosh, you need a vacation,
Yes, I
HLS?
need a vacation.
You need a vacation, logical genius?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell y'all right now, I need a vacation too. Because come October, I'm gonna lose my job, So I need a vacation badly. Just got
I need
that
back-to-back vacations,
It
actually.
sounds like you're about to be on a vacation with no
Yeah,
job.
Whether you like it or not, right?
It's about to be a fourth one. I can't believe it, but I guess this topic becomes timely. And what is our topic for today? HLS.
It's the best bang for your buck bucket list travel destinations.
You see, there was too many B's in there. That's why I normally introduce the topic. There was too many B's in there. I said that tongue twister. We are just gonna let HLS do it. So bang for our buck, bucket travel list. He'll say it again, but we have a very special guest that is going to help us out with this topic. Our guest today has a pretty prestigious 9-to-5, but between you and me, he's only there to use that money to fund his real passion of traveling. That passion began at a young age when during family vacations, they would visit national parks. Now, as an adult, he's continued to fuel that love for travel, which has taken him around the world. He's been a travel blogger and podcast host since 2005, won awards from the Society of American Travel Writers and North American Travel Journalists Association, and was once named the best independent travel journalist by Travel and Leisure magazine. He's discovered that language is a great window into different cultures, studying German, French, Italian, Spanish, Mandarin, Turkish, Russian, Swahili, and Greek, although he's only fluent in English. Please give a warm welcome to our guest tonight, Christensen. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show, Chris.
Chris, let me start you off with this icebreaker, and then I already have a follow-up question just from your bio alone. But for the icebreaker, Chris, what is your superpower, and how has that assisted you in your journey?
Actually, sleep is my superpower, and it's helpful when you're traveling and you can get up the first day of a trip to Asia or Europe and be on local time.
Okay, that is
don't have to deal
That's a
with jet
great
lag for a week.
superpower.
So
that is a great superpower right there. See, so in your bio, you talk about language and all
I
of these
do,
languages
yeah.
that you have been introduced to. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to have some sort of influence or understanding of the language you're traveling to, the country that you're traveling to, in the language there?
Great question.
I find it helpful, but honestly, you all have a superpower, which is you're fluent in the language of travel, because you can travel much of the world knowing nothing but English. So I don't know if you know the old story. If you're fluent in 3 languages, you're what? You're trilingual. Okay?
Trilingual.
If you're fluent in 2 languages, you're what?
Bilingual.
bilingual. If you're fluent in only one language, you're
Single.
American.
An
An arrogant American.
arrogant
potentially,
American.
potentially, but there you don't need to know another language to travel. I would not wait till you know another language to travel. But on the other hand, I remember learning just enough Italian, for instance, that we went to a restaurant in Milan, and the waiter's a young man. They spoke Italian, they spoke English. We didn't have to use Italian, but darn it, I had spent 6 months in learning the car Italian. I was going to use it. So the first night I'm ordering in Italian, things like that. Fine, no problem. We didn't plan on coming back, but the restaurant we went to go to was having a private party. So we went, well, we had a great meal the night before. Let's go back to this restaurant. We walked in, and Mama, who did not speak English as far as I know, looked at me and greeted me in Italian with, "Oh, you're the one who was speaking Italian." And we got a very different level of service that whole night because I had taken some effort to butcher the Italian language. Was not fluent, but was, trying to use it. So you don't have to wait till you're, fluent in the language. We certainly had people immediately switch to their language when I break out my French or my German or something like that. Let's do that in English. But they generally appreciate you making an effort. So it can open some doors.
Yeah, most definitely. See, we have an arrogant American on this show.
I knew you were going there. I knew
Yes,
it.
he goes by the habitual line stepper. We traveled abroad, and he decided that he was going to bring his broken Spanish to Brazil, where they speak Portuguese. So it's not even like broken Portuguese; it's broken Spanish to Brazil.
You can get away with your broken Spanish in Italy, but it's a little harder in Brazil.
It was very hard in Brazil.
They had no idea. They had no idea what they were talking about. Yeah. Good thing I spent the 4 months on Rosetta Stone, and I definitely saved his life that week, even though he put mine in jeopardy the whole time.
Wow, you're gonna put my business in the street.
All the way in the street.
Bro code. You're breaking bro code. So, Chris, you've traveled so many places around the world, and you keep doing it. So you have a lot of.
So you're saying I'm old here?
No, I'm saying you're experienced.
Just remember that, Chris. He called you old. Remember that.
You're experienced. But with that said, there must have been, and I hope not, but I'm assuming there must have been a frightening experience, a scary experience. What was that?
No. Actually, I can't think of any experience. I've been scammed in China, but in a pleasant way.
Okay.
I've
Where's
been
a pleasant way to be scammed?
What? Oh, it was one of those, hey, we're the artists who did that. We're doing a private gallery showing of our work. And, it was just work that they had gotten prints of. It wasn't their work. It wasn't real. It was a scam, but they were very nice about it. So,
okay.
I've been in places where I thought I should be afraid of this potentially. Like you fly into Cairo at 1 a.m. and someone says, taxi, and you do what they often tell you not to do, and you say, yeah, sure. And the guy takes your bags and walks off into the night. And my wife is saying, are you sure that's a good idea? And yeah, he seemed fine to me.
Wow.
And he was, but no, I can't actually think of a time. So maybe it's just a lack of common sense is the other possibility.
Okay.
But I've also not really gotten into trouble. So there are some advantages of being a, 6'3", 200+ pound guy where they might want to just pick on somebody else.
I can see that.
Very true.
So Chris, let me ask you this: for anyone who's never traveled like abroad, first time travelers, and you have people who are young who've never traveled, and people who are older in life who've never traveled abroad, right? What would be your number one tip for them if you had to give them one tip only and say, hey, if you're going to travel abroad, do the following or consider the following?
One tip only. I think my tip for most people is don't assume it's your only trip. There's some people that get so I have to see everything
Everything.
because I'm never going to go on a
Mm.
trip again. And that may be true for you, but sometimes you'll enjoy it more if you see a little less. You'll enjoy it more if you leave a reasonable pace. So we did a trip to Spain with my family in the heat of the summer, which I advised against.
Okay.
And then in 10 days, I think it was, we went to um, Madrid, Toledo, Sevilla, Los Pueblos Blancos, Cordova, Granada, Barcelona,
Wow.
and Segovia. Yeah, don't do that.
That's a lot.
We after that we said 2 nights minimum in every place. We were just always on the go, and sometimes, especially when I'm traveling with my family, it's just behooves me to slow down and do it at half the pace I would do if I were on my own, and just enjoy the things I'm seeing more rather than worrying about checking everything off a list.
It's funny you say that because I often hear that from friends who travel. Even myself, when I talk to people after I travel, like we didn't have enough time to do everything, right?
Yeah,
And because you're trying to do everything, right?
right,
And it's better to do a handful of things and kind of absorb what it is you're doing and
right.
take it all in and enjoy like where you're at, the location, the people, the food, anything like that, as opposed to trying to run around and scrambling and trying to get everything checked off on your list of things to do.
Yep,
Because you're right. I think people have that mentality of when are we going to come back here? When
right.
and traveling, it's still fairly easy for a lot of people and
Yeah.
available to a lot of people. So maybe
It's
you're right. Having that mindset of you're gonna come back or you can come back is actually a good mindset to have, I think.
Even if you're not, I still think enjoying the things, going at a pace where you can enjoy the things you're seeing is more important, I think, in the long run than did I see everything. It used to be see everything in the guidebook. Now it's see everything I saw on Instagram, but it's the same, it's the same
Yeah,
mental
basically.
checklist that we
yeah,
carry with us.
yeah, it's true.
So while you were listing off all of those places that you've been to, I know that in my head, all I heard was the cha-ching sound. Cha-ching, 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 like money, money, money. How do you, or what would you recommend to our listeners who may have this fear of, I can't afford these places that they're talking about. I can't afford to go on vacation.
So it depends where you go, as you all have done in your research here for your best budget friendly bucket list. There was
Yes.
some other B in there that I missed.
Chris got it. How come you can't get it, so?
But there are definitely places, even whether you do it independently or you do it with a tour. It's useful, for instance, if you go to one of the small group tour company sites, and then you go look at what they're going to charge you for a tour to France versus a tour to Cambodia. It's going to be, not counting flights. Flights are a different thing. It depends on how far you're going in general. It's not really that way anymore since deregulation, but it has something to do with how far you're going. If you're going closer, it's usually cheaper. But once you're there, it can be quite different depending on the destination. So if you're in Cambodia, is the question is, do I spend $3 on my meal or $4 and get the mango smoothie?
Mm,
That is not the question you're asking when you're in Paris or London.
mm,
Some places are just more expensive. So it does depend on where you go, how much it's going to cost you. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go to the places you want to go, but also then when you're there are different levels of cost. If you want to stay in an American style hotel, for instance, and you're outside the US, you're going to pay more, and you're probably not going to have as good as experience if you stay in that local guest house or that local, maybe it's an Airbnb, maybe it's a hostel, depending on what you're up for. But sometimes staying in a more local provider, and the way the locals stay is both less expensive and also a more fun experience in terms of getting to know more locals or getting to see things more from how they would see it.
What would your advice be to single travelers? Go with a buddy or be on your own and live vicariously?
I do both.
Okay.
So there's no right answer to that question. If you're traveling by yourself, you will, unless you're really, really shy like me, it is easier to meet people when you're not with somebody else for a lot of people. More
Really?
so for an extrovert, less so for an introvert. But you're not talking to somebody else. It's easier to meet people if you're on public transportation than it is if you're in a rental car, for instance.
That makes
All
sense.
sorts of things are going to make a difference there. But on the other hand, the friends that we've traveled with, we have these shared experiences that are treasured. I've got
Yeah.
one friend that we've
True.
traveled with that we've been to 6 continents together,
Wow.
Wow.
who's not my wife, and I've also been to 6 continents with my wife. So and those are cherished experiences. I would say that who you travel with is your most important decision. Is more important than where you go.
Good point.
Go
Good
with
point.
somebody who's going to enjoy the people. Enjoy what you're seeing. Don't go with the complainer. Unless you married her, in which case you've got a bigger problem.
So, Chris,
This is what you
where
signed
was
up
where was the first place you've traveled on your own, like by yourself, and what made you decide to say, you know what, I'm just gonna go by myself?
I don't know if I can come quite with the first place, but one of the most memorable trips that I had that was early on. So, also, let's put this in context. Um, I had done before I started the podcast. By the time I started the podcast, I'd been to maybe a dozen countries,
Okay.
not that many. And I started the podcast 18 years ago, and I was in my 40s. So I'm not one of those people who, was fortunate enough to start traveling when I was 20 or sort of, or didn't so much. We did one trip to Europe where, we did if this is Tuesday, this must be Belgium kind of trip to Europe back in 1987. But then we had 2 kids in 1988 and 1989, and we didn't go back abroad. We went to Canada, but we didn't go, overseas until they were 9 or 10. And that's really
Wow.
when we started a lot of our international travel. So, it's never too late, it's never too early. But I remember doing a trip. I had done volunteer trips down to Mexico with a church group going down to build houses in Tijuana.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I'd been to Mexico like 15 times, but I'd never seen Mexico. And if you've been to Tijuana, you understand what I'm saying. It's a different place. It's a border town.
Yeah.
And I love Tijuana, honestly, and love spending time out there in the barrio with the in not the richest part of town,
Yeah.
but the closing night fiestas that we'd have with the food cooked over the fire that was heated with the gas that was siphoned out of the truck. It's some of the best meals I've ever had. With the local
The
ladies
flavor.
making their homemade salsas and things. But I
Yeah.
really didn't feel like I'd seen Mexico, so I did a solo trip. Oh gosh, I don't know how many years ago now, 15 years ago, maybe something like that, to Mexico City and to Oaxaca. And both tremendous cities. Mexico City more intimidating, just in terms of crime and things like that have happened in Mexico City. Oaxaca easier for people who are early, who haven't done a lot of travel or solo travel. But it was a great trip, and it was one where my wife wasn't ready to go. She wasn't ready to go to Mexico. It took her a little longer to get over the I can't drink the water thing. And
Uh-huh.
once she got over that, she's been to many places where you can't drink the water. But that is they don't speak the language. You can't drink the water. Hey, I can't flush the toilet paper. I mean, all of those things can be a barrier to people who are used to things being the way they were at home.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
So you have the Amateur Traveler Travel Podcast.
Correct.
Is there a favorite episode that you would recommend to us and all of the listeners out there?
One episode. So yeah, 18 years. Gosh. I loved it. So one of the things I enjoy in the show is, so we cover both places I've been and we cover places I haven't been yet.
Okay.
And one of the recent shows we did, for instance, that has really put one of the places on the map for me of someplace I want to get to in the short term has been the show we did on Azerbaijan.
Mm.
And if you can find Azerbaijan on the map, You are ahead of most of the people, I'd say, in the U.S. who, 50% of which, according to some studies, can find their state on a map. So, Azerbaijan is a little more exotic than that. But we've also done some great shows on, like, we did a road trip on Kansas. That I loved when I heard about Kansas had the world's largest museum of small versions of large things, which is just
okay.
I love you trying to parse that. I see LHS going.
The wheels are turning.
So that's one of those great Americana kind of road trips, and we do both. We do domestic destinations. We do exotic destinations that you're going to have to look for on your map, like pony treks in Lesotho or things like that. I love them all, but I like hearing about places that I hadn't thought about going, and now I want to. And now, since I started the show, I've gotten a chance to get to many of those places. We had a show years ago about the Rutapuk in the Yucatan, which is a particular drive south of Merida, Mexico, where you go see, this particular cave with 10,000-year-old cave art and the ruins at Uxmal and some other ruins down there. And it's not crowded like Chichen Itza, which is also in the Yucatan. You're going to be there with Mexican tourists. And when I heard about it, I went, I got to go there. And when I was there, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that, it did not disappoint. So I'm just like a listener of the show too, where I'm putting things on my bucket list based on what I hear.
So everyone listen in as we now take Chris to a place. We are going to transition to the next segment of our show where we are going to go over the topic of best budgeted bucket list travel locations.
Now, are there bonus points for segues?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And that was a heck of a
I just need to know the scoring here. Okay.
Yes. Just remember he called you old. HLS called you old. And remember
when did I do that?
When at the beginning,
he has bad memory. He has bad memory.
Experienced.
He has bad memory.
Pay attention to the show.
Now, Logical Genius, please tell Chris what is going to happen next.
All right, Chris, we're going to have a lot more fun. So what HLS Social Juve and I are going to do is to present to you our list of the top 5. And I'm not going to repeat the topic, but you heard the topic. The listeners heard the topic. Our top 5 destinations, bucket list, destinations, budget. Yeah, I'm saying it all wrong, right? But you heard the topic. The best destination. I can't even say it now. Best destinations for us to travel. And we're each going to present to you our list one at a time. We don't know each other's list, so we have no idea what each other have to say. But you get to decide who goes first, who goes second, and who goes last. And then it's judgment time for you. You get to decide which one of us has the best list, but you're going to start with third place because we need to know who the loser is. We don't really care about second place because they're the first place loser. And then we ultimately need to know who is the champion for this episode.
And as I understand it, the judgment criteria are entirely mine.
Correct.
There you
go. You're ready.
HLS doesn't even have to explain it to you.
Nope. You might like, for example, the fact that I called you experienced.
And then are we going to do these from 5 to 1? Bottom to top of the list?
5 to 1.
5 to 1.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
HLS, let's start with you.
Okay. Here we
ready.
go.
Get right into it. He's ready.
So,
hey, podcasting, 18 years. 1,700, 1,900 episodes of various, 4 different podcasts over 18 years. So yeah,
veteran.
Time behind the mic.
So here's how I sorted my list.
Okay.
I have my own set of criteria, right? So I need a restful vacation, right? Something that's gonna center me and bring me balance. So at number 5, I have Tulum, Mexico.
Okay.
So it's got beautiful beaches. It's got historic ruins like the Mayan ruins. It's got these underground caves and sinkholes where you could just like wander the natural beauty and swim underground.
Yep.
It's great for places like yoga. It's like a huge yoga center. You could take it's called a sound bath. It's supposed to like recenter you and re-energize you. It's got a lot of healing qualities. And again, we're talking about bucket list budget. It's $1 American for 17 pesos. So you're on the winning side. At number 4.
Yes, but that doesn't tell us what you can get for 17 pesos. That the exchange rate isn't a good indicator of value.
Fair, because it could cost 25,000 pesos for a loaf of bread. So you're right. So at number 4, I have Egypt, right? Because I'm looking for a more cultural vacation, right? So it's got probably arguably the oldest civilization in the world. It's got the longest river in the world. You could take a boat cruise along the Nile. You need to see the pyramids, and though that natural wonder, you could probably stand.
Those are actually artificial, just so you know. Not a natural wonder. Yeah, people built those.
Oh yeah.
Possibly aliens, but yeah.
Is that the rumor for the travel people? That
no.
I thought you were bringing me to like Area 51 talk now. I wasn't sure. So it's got the pyramids, it's got the Sphinx, and you could be biblical and go to the Red Sea and see if you could part it like Moses. So there's a lot of cultural significance. And then number 3, Chris, I have Iceland, right? And Iceland is my experience vacation, right?
Oh, right.
So, I mean, I love the show Vikings. So there's a lot of Viking heritage in Iceland. Shout out to Ragnar Lothbrok, my man. You could also go to, the Blue Lagoon, which is like a man-made lake, and it's heated by volcanic ashes, which is kind of an experience. It's one of the few places in the world you can see the Northern Lights. So that will be an experience. You could travel inside a volcano. And there's also sometimes of the year it has 24-hour daylight. So I've never experienced that before. I would like to check that out. And I also like this show called Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmern. And on that show, he had something called fermented shark.
Fermented rotten shark.
And he said it tastes like urine. But something about that guy in that show makes
I managed to avoid that in Iceland, but yes.
So you have something for urine in your mouth.
Listen, don't put my business in the streets. Keep telling you that. And number 2, Chris, I want to party. And there's no place to party, no better place to party than Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
All right.
I've been there and I had one of the most fantastic times of my life. The people, the samba, the beaches, the drinks. Did I say the food? I went to this restaurant called Mario's in Rio, in Copacabana Beach. And it was a Churrascaria, a Brazilian steakhouse. And every single cut of meat that I had, no matter what kind it was better than the next.
Delicious.
It was fantastic. And did I say Mardi Gras? Did I say Mardi Gras?
No, you didn't actually.
But when I went, every day, every corner, every block was a party. And not even talking about the Samba Drome. You could walk out of, back then when I went, there was something called internet cafes. We went to go check in internet cafe and I walked out. I turned the corner. Next thing you know, a street party. One of the most fantastic experiences of my life. And then number 1, I need to do a historical trip.
Okay. And
that is South Africa. It's kind of crazy to think where we are now. And in 1994, that's when they ended apartheid. So you kind of want to go experience that. So not experience apartheid, but kind of see.
Please no.
No, not at all. But see kind of the newness of it and almost kind of take a dip back in history. I mean, you could go to places like Cape Town where you could visit Robben Island where Mandela was incarcerated. You could go to Joburg and see the Apartheid Museum tour. You could go to Soweto where Nelson Mandela lived and see his museum and just get a whole bunch of history in that one trip. And Chris, that is my 5 cents on the best bucket list places to travel on a budget.
I will save feedback for all 3 at once.
Okay.
We will go to Sosoju.
All right. In the building. And my approach to my list, I'm going to give you an experience because I've experienced these places. And at number 5, I recommend taking an all-inclusive to Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. I went there with the logical genius, We stayed at an all-inclusive resort. He blew up the bathroom. The people were saying "ay coño" after that. We had so much fun because they had a pool. There was a pool foam party. Never been to one of those before. We saw people go through obstacle courses, fall off. And the best part about it is at these resorts, they usually have an MC that kind of takes you through your stay. And this one guy, all he kept saying was "swap it," okay? And it was just the most hilarious thing. So I recommend an all-inclusive through Groupon, mind you, Punta VR. At number
We're talking
4,
budget, so okay.
yeah, that's where we stayed, somewhere from Groupon, and it was absolutely phenomenal. At number 4, I say go to Cozumel, Mexico. Take a cruise if you can. Don't go to see the seaside. Go on the indoor, get a nice little drink package, and go over to Cozumel. I did that in my younger years. I was getting over a heartbreak. I met Jennifer Lopez. It wasn't the real Jennifer Lopez, but her name was Jennifer Lopez, and she resided in Florida. And that just brought my spirits right back up after that heartbreak. I was back to So Juve again. At number 3, I have Negril, Jamaica. Now, me and HLS, we went down there to Jamaica. I think it was for his birthday. And he was staying in hedonism. I couldn't afford hedonism. So I stayed in the resort, a few beaches down or away. But what I did do is on his special night, I did pay for a 1-day pass to go to hedonism. I ended up in a toga. I ended up rapping on stage. And people thought that I actually stayed there. So I was actually able to go back to the private beach afterwards because people thought that I actually stayed there. So I had a hedonism time without the hedonism price. Okay, so there's a hack for you right there. At number 2, I also have Copacabana, Rio in Brazil. And I love what you said earlier. Sometimes you don't have to do everything, because there was only one thing on our list to do, which was to see the Christ Redeemer statue. Okay. And we did not see that. That was the only thing that we had on the list, and we did not go see that at all. Everything that HLS described was absolutely true. We met some great people there, friends to this day that we still keep in touch
till
with.
this day.
Yes. I saved HLS's life because he had that broken Spanish and he was going to get us kidnapped. Like, that was guaranteed for sure. And it was just one of the best vacations ever. I have to go back. And at number 1, it's not exotic, but it is a staycation. Look at your local areas. And one of the biggest regrets that I actually have in life is for all the times that I've been in New York, born in New York, lived in New York, I never saw the World Trade Center. And they no longer exist. So sometimes you don't have to travel abroad. Sometimes the historical event or aspect is right there in your backyard. Treat it like you're a tourist. Don't take it for granted, because it may not be there. So that is my 5 cents on the list. Next person, logical genius. Yeah, you're gonna hear this historical event. It's gonna be so boring. So please have a pillow.
But you're going to New York. You're not going to go see the World Trade Center. What are you going to see on your staycation?
Oh, on my staycation, I still haven't seen the Statue of Liberty.
Okay.
So I would definitely go ahead and do that.
Right.
Ah,
excellent.
I guess it's my turn, Chris.
Of elimination.
Yeah. Interesting list from my 2 co-hosts. So it's funny, right? If you break down the topic, best budget friendly bucket list travel destinations. The funny thing about the bucket list or the budget part is the budget is what you set it, right? So you can have a big budget, and if you overspend upon your budget, then you're going over budget. But if you have a big budget and you're smart, you can be under budget. So I focus more on the bucket list and I guess bang for your buck part of it, right?
Okay.
Because that's where I think where it matters with this discussion. So at number 5, I agree with So Juve on this one. I'd say anywhere in the United States, especially for anyone who's living here in the United States. We have so many places in this country that I think people haven't seen yet. And we have a variety from major metropolitan areas like New York, Chicago, DC, to things that are more in tune with nature, like Yosemite, anywhere in the Midwest, things that, where you can see both, a city and the natural wonders of the world. So I think anyone in the United States, and for the most part, you
If
live
you
here
had to
already.
narrow it down to one thing in the United States
One location, um,
for your bucket list.
for my bucket list, you know what? I'm gonna say Providence, Rhode Island.
Oh,
My
Alright.
not
home
the
Did
state.
not see
mall.
that coming, but
Well,
okay.
you know why? Because it's funny. Like I have a lot of friends or a lot of people I've met since I live in New York now, and that
Okay.
I've met since coming out here. And every single time I mention, "Oh, I'm originally from Rhode Island," I love it there. It's so great there. Everything, the food's great there. So many options from Providence to Newport. This it's a small state, so you can get anywhere within 10, 15, 20 minutes of driving, and you have access to a variety of different things. And I grew up there, and it's a close pace of mine. So I would always recommend people to come visit Rhode Island. It's a great state to visit. At number 4, I have Iceland. And Iceland because I'm a big nature person. I've always wanted to see the Northern Lights in person. Like I've always wanted to see it up front, and I've heard that if you do see it, because it's not always on. When you do see it, it's one of those things where you're just in awe, and you just admire what you're looking at. It's just your place in the universe and all of that stuff, right? And then the hot springs, I've heard are amazing to visit. There are plenty of them, right? I think people try to tend to go to the more popular one, but I think there are a lot of them that people don't know about and aren't as busy with tourists. So I think Iceland is a destination for me. And the cost of like food there, maybe it's like what, maybe $20-25 a meal if you're going to like a restaurant, but you can always find something cheaper. And I think that's where the budgeting part comes in. At number 3, excuse me, at number 3, yep, I have South Africa. So I agree with HLS. I think everyone needs to visit South Africa or Africa in general. And South Africa has a lot of rich history, cultural diversity. The food there is great. A lot of natural landscape. So I think it's just a must have or must go to travel destination. At number 2, I have Mexico. Mexico has great food options. Um, to HLS's point, the trend, the dollar to the peso, yes, it's high. It's in favor of the US dollar, but I think things are generally cheaper and more affordable there. Obviously, you're staying in like five-star hotels or whatever, but if you go outside of the resort areas into the cities, into the towns, you can find things that are very affordable, depending on your comfort level in terms of food and even places to stay. At number 1, this was tough because I was dabbling between different countries, and I said to myself, you know what? If I get to this area, it's affordable enough for me to go basically anywhere once I'm there. And that to me is Southeast Asia, right?
Okay.
The flights there are probably going to be on the price, but like you mentioned earlier, flights anywhere, the further you go away, it's going to be expensive. But once you get there, this goes into the bang for your buck part of the topic. You're going to spend so much less to get so much more, right? You can spend $4 or $5 on, decent restaurant street food, or you can go upscale and pay maybe $8 for a five-star, restaurant or something like that. You're paying maybe $20 a day, a night for a really good 4 or 5 star hotel, probably. So that to me, Southeast Asia, and you could do this in Cambodia, which is my heritage. I'm Cambodian. Thailand, which I was born in Thailand. Vietnam, my grandmother was Vietnamese, and then Laos, which I have some friends who are Laos, so I guess really no blood connection there. But in all of these places, you have great food, friendly people, um, affordable things to do. You can spend maybe 20-30 bucks a day and do a lot of things, including meals, travel. And you have like historical landmarks. Cambodia has Angkor Wat, right? One of the ancient wonders of the world, which
Mhm.
you can explore. You could spend a whole week exploring that temple in that area and still not see everything. Um, and Thailand, Thailand is known for its food. People love Thai food in this country. That's been booming over the last few years. So for me, number one is Southeast Asia, and that's my list, Chris.
All right.
All right,
Okay, I'm going to
Chris.
give you some feedback first,
Yes,
Yes,
of
please.
course.
and then
Well, before you get into the
yes,
feedback,
yes.
we go through something that we call cross-examination. Is
Oh,
there
excellent.
anything from our list, and Logical Genius will put his list in the chat, is there anything from our list that you require further clarification?
No.
No. Okay, HLS, do you have
I
anything?
haven't been to every place that you recommended. I
Okay.
haven't been to Rio, and I haven't been to Jamaica.
Okay.
Oh, and I haven't been to the DR. So actually, it was more your list than anybody else's. But I've been to all the other places.
Okay.
I think if I've got the list correctly here, so I have some reason to have some opinions, and have been to all 50 states.
Oh, wow.
Although,
Wow.
Oklahoma, I drove in and got gas. So, it was cheap.
That counts.
It counts.
That
It
counts.
counts.
You get to count, you get to decide how you count things, right? So first of all, before we get into the feedback and before we get into who won and who lost, for those who are listening, don't let anybody do what I'm about to do, which is rate your bucket list. Your bucket list is your bucket list.
It's true.
My
It's
bucket
true.
list has going to all of the sites from the Civil War, but that were battles between the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac, because I'm a nerd. Your bucket list doesn't have to have that.
Okay.
My bucket list has going to all the baseball parks,
Good point.
all the Major League Baseball parks. You don't have to have that, because I'm also a baseball nerd, right? Your bucket list is your bucket list. But that being said, I do have feedback. So we'll do it in the order. So
Okay.
HLS,
Yes.
Tulum, gorgeous city. Not my favorite Mayan ruins.
Okay.
If you're in Tulum, go to Koba.
Koba.
I have stood on a Mayan pyramid by myself at 9:00 in the morning in Koba, with just jungle around me. And you won't get that in Chichen Itza, and you won't get that in Tulum. For beaches, go a little farther north to Playa del Carmen, party with the Europeans and the Mexicans.
Okay.
But Tulum is gorgeous. Not a bad choice.
Okay.
And also, but for budget, I might go further inland to Merida and eat $1 street tacos in Sunday afternoon when there's the fiesta in the park and people are dancing. The locals are in their costumes dancing, and it's going to be the best meal you have in Mexico, and it's $1 street tacos. I mean,
love it. Love it.
Beat that. $1
it's
street
great,
talk.
and it's cheap.
Okay.
Egypt, can't go wrong. Makes my top 3 all-time places if you love history. Again, if you're a history buff, Egypt has to be in the discussion. I mean, literally, you're standing there looking at the Great Pyramids of Giza, and they're saying this happened in the Old Kingdom. We don't know who conquered the Old Kingdom. We've lost them to the times of history, but we know they had an unfair advantage because they had the wheel. And you're looking at the pyramids and you're going, how the hell can that be?
Yeah.
So amazing place. Not as budgeted destination, but because it is Africa, it's pretty cheap. It's pretty affordable. I noticed what was interesting is the only place that was mentioned in Europe was Iceland, which is interesting because the top destinations for most Americans are Europe. So I applaud you all for having a little more variety here, and Europe also can be a little more expensive. Iceland, for instance, is expensive. The lodging is expensive. The food is expensive. Gorgeous place. Being able to stand in the shadow of Eyjafjallajökull, which is the closest I can get to the pronouncing of the unpronounceable volcano there, is amazing. If you want to see geysers, don't go there. Go to Yellowstone.
Okay.
There are half the geysers in the world are in Yellowstone. If you've been to Yellowstone first and you go to geyser, after which all geysers are named, you're going to go, that's it. If you haven't seen any geysers, go to Iceland first. You'll love it.
Okay.
Beautiful country. Do you know what you do if you get lost in an Icelandic forest?
No, what? Light a fire?
Stand up. There's nothing. There's not a lot of trees up there.
There's no trees there.
But you can be places like the the Christian the Christian lava flow, which is just outside of Reykjavik, which is a 1,000-year-old lava flow from the time when they accepted Christianity, which is sharp lava covered with 6 inches of green moss, and you'll feel like you're in Dr. Seuss. Amazing place, but a little expensive.
Okay.
Rio, I don't think there's any criticizing Rio. You both were there. I haven't been there. The only thing I would think about also is if you're thinking about South America and you're thinking about party, also think about Buenos Aires, another place where the food is amazing and tango in every corner. But got no criticism for Rio. Little higher crime rate there, so some people are going to be a little more intimidated by Brazil. But we've got a Brazilian adopted daughter who she just went to school with us for 2 years, and if I criticize Brazil, I'm in trouble. So
we got friends with bulletproof Jeeps, so we're okay.
There you go. South Africa again, great destination, not an expensive destination. Cape Town, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, in my opinion. And going out there to you'll probably do your tour of the island prison with someone who was locked up there. If you go now. If you wait and go 10, 20 years from now, you won't. So it's one of the arguments for going now. If you like wine, when you're in Cape Town, go out to the wine area too. Also wonderful. Or go on safari. Done the cross Africa land journey from Joburg up to Vic Falls. It's all amazing. Solid choice, South Africa. All-inclusive Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. If you like all-inclusive, not my jam, but it can be a cheaper way to travel at the all-inclusives. That is absolutely true. You won't interact with the culture as much. And it depends on where you do the all-inclusive. If you're doing like the Club Med, you can be anywhere in the world and it's going to seem like Club Med rather than DR or Mexico or whatever. But definitely a way to save money. My first sponsored trip for Amateur Traveler was to Cozumel, to an all-inclusive resort down there. Loved it. Again, not my scene, but solid choice. Dominican Republic. Cruise to Cozumel, Mexico. Cozumel, on the other hand, versus Rio, is one of the safest places you can go to New Mexico. But it also feels a lot like Miami. I mean, it doesn't feel much like Mexico. That's the only critique I would have about Cozumel. When I wrote it, I went to Cozumel, and I then mentioned the trip that I did to Mexico City, which was not as comfortable. One day there were riot police out in force right outside my hostel. One was a deep dive into Mexican culture. One was all-inclusive resort that felt like Southern U.S. Okay. So it's not a very Mexican place, is the only thing I would say with Cozumel. So it's not necessarily the best Mexican experience, but it's a good budget experience. And if you're looking for a safe version of Mexico, not a bad choice. Wouldn't be my choice. Negril, Jamaica. What if your buddy isn't going to the expensive resort? Would be my only question there. Got no criticism of Jamaica. I would say spend some time in the interior too. Don't just go to the big beach resorts and get a chance to see what makes Jamaica Jamaica. Do one of the local food tours, or do a Rastafarian tour or something like that. Do something that's a little different that you can only get in Jamaica. Would be the thing that I would recommend.
Agree.
Coco Cabana, Rio. We already talked about that. Hey, it's Rio. Just sorry you didn't get to see the statue.
We only have one thing on our list.
Try looking up,
Chris.
We got to do the sequel. We got to do the part 2.
Well, see, you did exactly what I said, right? You said, hey, we can get back here. We're having a good time. We're gonna skip the thing that everybody says we have to see. I'm with you. Staycation. I think staycations are great. Some of us had to do a lot of that over the last couple of years, right? And I'm a huge fan of the U.S. You talked about, the national parks, still a big national park proponent. And for budgets, you can get the national park passport, and by the time you get to the third park, you're not paying any more money. and whether you're going to the great big parks in the west, or whether you're going to some of the interesting things like dry tortugas in the east, or even one of the 6 national parks in the Boston area or something like that, it could be a lot of fun. Get a national park passport and try and check off all the ones near you. Great idea,
Good
staycation.
tip.
And then you're not paying for hotels.
Yeah.
And there's probably some really great places to see near where you are. U.S., little vague, but you went out there on a limb and said Providence, Rhode Island, smallest state with the largest name of any state.
This is true.
Because the name of the state is actually
Well, no, wait, we dropped it. We dropped the plantation part.
I think I heard that. But
That
it
got
used to
dropped.
be-
That got
it
dropped
used to
maybe a
be,
year, 2 years ago.
Rhode Island and Providence Plantation.
Yeah, the
Was
plantation
the
part of
original.
it got dropped.
Yep. That's right. I did hear that got dropped. Iceland, we talked about that already. Again, gorgeous place. If you have a lot of time, a lot of people recommend the Ring Road, but even just doing the southern route, you can do a lot of that in a day or two, and then do the Golden Circle and such, and you got a real good, you can see a lot of waterfalls. One geyser, you can see where the continents come together there. So great place, but again, a little expensive. Mexico is great. There's a lot of different places to go in Mexico. I didn't pin you down for where you would go in Mexico.
Anywhere.
Yeah, because
Anywhere.
your list is very, very vague. Very, very vague there. Like,
Anywhere in Mexico.
There's some places that I would not go in Mexico.
No, this is true.
I would not
This
go
is true.
necessarily to Juarez. I would not go
Well, I was going to say Juarez.
Sinaloa. There's some places that I would not put on my Mexico list. And then there's some other places I would absolutely put on my Mexico list. I would absolutely put Oaxaca. I would put San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, number of Mexico City. Go out and see Teotihuacan, amazing place. You could see pyramids without even leaving the North American continent.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't pick a particular location, because there's so many. I mean, Mexico is a big country.
It is.
Obviously, you want to stay away from, unless you're completely ignorant and just want to go anywhere, stay away from the dangerous part. But there's a lot of
and don't try to buy drugs wherever you go. So
yeah. So there's a lot of
away from that
locations
scene,
in Mexico that you can go to that are just as good as the next, if not better.
Excellent. And then we had Southeast Asia, solid choice. And Siem Reap is, let's just underline that. When you talk about Angkor Wat, I took a group from Saigon overland to Phnom Penh, to Angkor Wat, then on into Bangkok. And when we were in Bangkok, we were looking at the different tours we could do, and one of them was to go to several of the old temples in Thailand, in one of the ancient cities of Thailand. And we looked at it and went, oh, it's kind of like Angkor Wat, but smaller.
Yeah.
Any place you go after Angkor Wat is going to be like, oh, it's kind of like Angkor Wat, but smaller.
Yeah, but smaller, yeah.
The scale of Angkor Wat, the other temples there is a pretty amazing place. And, $1 street mango smoothies, from my lady making a mango smoothies downtown, fresh from the fruit. You can't beat it for once you get there. Once you've
and people say, I know, I'm glad you mentioned Siem Reap, because Phnom Penh is mentioned a lot because it's the capital city, but it's not really that good for visiting. It's a capital city, right? There's not much, but Siem Reap, I heard, is just much
Phnom Penh.
more.
I liked Phnom Penh, but some of the things we did in Phnom Penh was we toured some of the darker history of Cambodia.
Yeah,
and you can't get away from that in Cambodia. I think if you're going to see it,
Killing
you ought to
Fields,
go out to the Killing Fields. You ought to go to the museum that used to be the high school, but was basically
it was an elementary school, right? Was it elementary school?
I thought it was a school for sure. I thought it was a high school, but I wouldn't swear to that. And the name of it skips me off the top of my head here. But yeah, I would go there. They're very somber though. It's like when you go to Europe, going to Dachau or going to Auschwitz. It's a very somber experience, but it's a very important part of their history. And anybody who's over a certain age has a story about what that time did to their family. But these days we just updated our podcast on Cambodia with a friend who's been living in Cambodia for years, and said now there's a much more upbeat, positive, youth-oriented culture in that country. great food in all four of those countries that you named: Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. I thought I didn't like pad Thai until I went to Thailand and had real pad Thai, and it's like
Yeah, real pad
just on
Thai
the
in
street.
Thailand. Yes,
Excellent.
not the sugary stuff that they have here.
Oh, the stuff that I had here was like, oh, this is just like, this tastes like noodles. Just had no flavor, and you don't eat Thai food over there and say this doesn't have flavor. So
Yeah.
great place for food. Okay,
Hold on, Chris.
Yes. Okay.
Before you decide,
yes, sir.
There's some things you need to consider.
All right.
Right. So while it's your own criteria, no,
it's not my show.
So Dhruv didn't really follow the rules, and he's a big guy to say you didn't follow the rules. You didn't follow the rules. His number one staycation is so vague. So Dhruv lived in Rhode Island.
He did pin it down to Statue of Liberty. So we did make him.
He said New York. He said New York.
But his real word was staycation, and he said
that is true. It's written right there.
He currently lives in Maryland. So how do you have a staycation living in Maryland and you're traveling to New York?
All right, that's a beautiful question, because you claim to be the people's champ, and I'm actually the people's champ. There are listeners who are actually trying to get value out of this show. So for all my listeners out there, wherever you are, that staycation is wherever you are. Find the touristy place where you are. I shared that experience about New York is because, I was out there and I never once saw the World Trade Centers, and we all know what happened there. So that is a regret of mine. So to avoid those regrets, plan a staycation, and that definitely can fit into the budget there. So yes, I stand by my staycation.
I don't necessarily disagree with Social Juvenile. I just wouldn't have it. Obviously, didn't have it as my number one. But staycation, United States, we already talked about. There's a lot of great things that people have not seen yet in this country that people need to see.
So my thing that I would like you to consider, Chris, is that Logical Genius, his list is very, very vague. He has USA. He has South Africa. South Africa is big. He has Southeast Asia, where he now has 1, 2, 3, 4 people. So now we're like a My 8 Cents podcast. That's not the name of the show. We're My 5 Cents. We got to keep within the 5. So if we're going to talk about rules and rule breakers, Logical Genius, you broke all the rules.
Oh, Chris, I love when HLS and Soju try to apply logic, because it's just a miss, right? It's not even a hit or miss. It's just a miss. Because Chris, can you repeat what the topic of today's show is? Because I don't want to say all those B's.
Well, Chris, remember,
best budget-friendly bucket list travel destination.
That is correct.
Didn't say city. Didn't say state. Didn't say specifically any specific location. Destination. Southeast Asia is a destination. South Africa is a destination. Mexico is a destination. So where am I wrong in this?
Well, you're wrong. Actually, Chris already tore your list apart, because there's certain parts of Mexico we don't want to go. So actually, you know what? You're absolutely right. There's nothing else to say. Chris tore your list apart.
It's the destination.
You said everywhere in Mexico, and he was like, "Hey, wait a second."
Grasping at straws, trying to tear down my list. I get it. It's
intimidating. It was already torn down. Who do you have for cross-examination?
I mean, I go back to what I said about best bang for your buck, and my number one alone knocks out all 10 of yours, I think, because you can't get
5 and 1.
You can't get any. Okay, pick one of them. You can't get any. That's why I said once you get there, traveling within those countries is cheap. The initial cost that you're paying is your flight there. You're probably paying what, $1,500 just from the US to either Thailand, Cambodia, or Laos or Vietnam. And once you're there, traveling within the country is relatively cheap. You're not spending thousands or hundreds of dollars to go from one country to another. And on top of that, you can, every time, talk to anyone who's been there. I lived like a king. I lived like a queen out there, because the US dollar travels so far and things are so cheap, but yet so good out there. So you can't get any better bang for your buck than Southeast Asia.
So Chris, here we are. we are at decision time. We want to know, who do you have in third place? Who has the worst list?
And honestly, it's hard. I'll tell you that. I have gone back
We
and
didn't
forth
say it was going to be easy.
multiple times. You heard the criteria, or you heard the critique against some of the lists, all of the lists.
And fair. They were fair.
Yeah.
In third place, oh. Here's what it comes down to. I'll be honest.
Yeah,
it's like
please.
Vagueness is there's an argument. That argument holds some weight here. Staycation is also vague. A lot of you named countries rather than cities. We got two cities from HLS and four from Sosaju.
Yes.
But at least one of them I wouldn't recommend. So,
just think about how expensive Iceland is, and they definitely want to go to Iceland.
Iceland can be expensive. I agree with that. This could have gone anyway.
But which way is it going,
Yeah,
Chris?
who's your number three?
I am going to give. Honestly, I've moved first into third and third into first a couple different times in my mind.
Wow.
I am going to give third place. It's dead air. It's always so good for a podcast. Really, what you look for is,
I thought we were lagging for a second. I'm like,
no, that was
did we just lose connection? Chris?
I'm gonna give it to logical genius.
Wow.
And for the vagueness, not because I disagree with any of
fair. That's fair. That's fair.
If you'd picked a place in Mexico, I think it would have bumped out. In number one.
Who is in first place?
If you haven't been to Egypt, you don't know what you're missing. I'm going to give it to HLS.
What?
It is one of if you ask me my favorite places that I've traveled in, it is a budget destination. It is sin par non. It is a very different place. When you're watching a civilization that dates back as far as, not the oldest civilization in the world. The first cities were in northern India, by the way, but one of the longest continuous civilizations in the world, because that civilization didn't carry on as much. That probably was the difference there, even though you had Iceland.
I thought they were both out of the water with the Iceland. I said, "Oh,
it was a good argument. It was a good argument, honestly." But
Chris, you stepped in the right direction. That's all that matters.
Boy,
terrible.
Blind squirrel, right? What did they say? Blind squirrel.
Your boy HLS is at the top once again. Once again, put some respect on my damn name.
Yeah,
never gonna happen.
You're gonna go broke with his list. Just remember that.
What are you talking about?
So, Chris, what do you have in your 5 cents? Where are your top 5 areas that you would go to
for budget travel?
Yes. Budget bucket list.
Budget bucket list. Oh, then we have to back up here, because my bucket list has to be places I have not been.
Correct.
So in my budget bucket list, there are still parts of Southern Africa that I have not seen. I've been to South Africa, amazing. Botswana, for wildlife, I would say even better. Zimbabwe, hurting country, great people. I don't know how any country can have like 90% unemployment rate and not just dissolve. But good wildlife, amazing place, Big Falls. But I have not been to Namibia.
Okay.
And so in Southern Africa, I would say Namibia would be on my list.
Okay.
In Latin America, Colombia is up near the top of my list.
That's on
It's a
my
place
list
I
too.
may go. Like I'm debating whether I'll spend a week in Colombia coming up this year. I just came back from Belize and Guatemala, so they can't be on my bucket list anymore. But I'll tell you, that
Belize is
was a
on my
pretty darn
list.
good trip.
Belize is on my
Going
list.
out
Yeah, I
there
had
with
Central
all
America, and I mean, it
was
wasn't
amazing.
specific, but I had that region in my list.
Yeah, I wouldn't
but
put Costa
I
Rica on
took
the
it up.
list for budget,
Yeah,
but an amazing place.
Costa Rica is fantastic.
Yeah.
yeah.
In terms of Southeast Asia, I still want to go to Myanmar. It's a little
Yeah.
more politically sensitive right
Mhm.
now.
It is.
But I haven't been there. I haven't been to Laos, but I think for some reason Myanmar's a little higher on my list in Southeast Asia. And then I would say probably the next two for me are in the Caucasus. And so they would be Azerbaijan and either Armenia or Georgia. And I probably, just because we did the show on Armenia more recently, Armenia is bumped Georgia a little bit in my bucket list, but they're very similar ancient cultures. Armenia was the very first nation that became Christian. And so it has a long history, and Azerbaijan right next door has a very different history. Going back to Persia and Zoroastrianism and things like that. So those two places are also on my list right now, and I want to get back to India if I had to get the sixth. So there are places in India that I have not seen yet. Well, there's a lot of places in India, and
Yeah.
in the pandemic early on, when it looked like things were going not as bad and India wasn't having a problem, they contacted me and said, you can go any place in India. Where do you want us to take you? And that's a hard decision because there's a lot of fascinating places to see there. But probably at that time I would have told them Rajasthan. Although now we did a show more recently on gosh, now I'm this for the one name that's not going to come to me in places. The region that's disputed with Pakistan is a gorgeous and very non-Indian looking destination. Looks like it could be Switzerland.
Wow.
Very green, beautiful area up there. So those are kind of where on my bucket list right now.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, and actually,
bones.
I've got a conference coming up in South Africa, hopefully next year.
Nice.
In which case, if I'm there, then opportunistically, I want to get to one of the small states like Lesotho or Eswatini, formerly Swaziland.
Oh, that's great.
Nice.
So,
Well, thank you for sharing. What we like to do here is we actually ask the people their opinion on it. So, Logical Genius, break down the people's poll for us.
All right, Chris. We talked to our listeners. We asked social media and see what their input was, and they gave us their 5. I guess
I
this is
don't
the
have to rate
culmination.
them, do I? Also,
No.
No.
tell
This
your
is
listeners which of
the
them are
people's opinion.
good.
In no particular order. Mexico came up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no specific city in Mexico, so I don't know if you can knock them for that, like you knocked me for that. But Mexico came up.
Yep.
The Dominican Republic came up.
Mm-hmm.
I think relatively cheap to go there, not too far of flight, a couple of hours, and not expensive to to eat there and do things there. Jamaica was another location. Alaska came up, which is
Not as
interesting.
cheap,
It's not.
but interesting destination.
Yeah. And Greece was another one, which is funny because I think especially around the pandemic, maybe even before the pandemic, I heard a lot of people were traveling to Greece at a certain point because it was so
Greece is
much.
one of my favorite countries. I just spent a
Yeah.
week on a boat off the Peloponnese in the Saronic Islands of Greece, and love the food, love the history, love the people. Amazing place,
Yeah.
beautiful place.
Yeah. And I'll throw in another one because this one got a lot of votes, I guess, or a lot of feedback. Croatia, which has surprised me.
Croatia's a solid bet. If you're thinking about Croatia though, and you want cheaper, so Croatia's amazing.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong. Dubrovnik doesn't feel like a real city, but gorgeous place. If you're there on the walls, look at which are the bright orange buildings. Those are the ones that were destroyed in the war with Serbia and Montenegro. So it's been rebuilt, but it's a gorgeous city. But I think even better might be like Split and Troyer and the national park of Plitvice. Are amazing places in Croatia. But also, if you're in the region, consider Slovenia and Bosnia Herzegovina.
Bosnia. Yeah.
My family did a trip where we flew into Bosnia Herzegovina into Sarajevo because it was cheaper. We basically could get miles. We could get flights in there with miles where there was no way we could get into Dubrovnik because it's a much more well-known destination. And we loved Sarajevo more.
Wow.
Fascinating destination, inexpensive, amazing history. A little tragic history is the siege of Sarajevo, but it's also where World War I started. But amazing city, and too often overlooked.
Yeah, I was going to say
yeah,
with the wars that happened in the 90s there,
yeah.
and I mean the 90s was not that far
I know.
ago. Like, did they really rebuild it all up?
Yeah, great
How is
place.
it? Great
Great
place.
place, and half the price of Dubrovnik, for instance. Literally half the price. And then I would also consider Slovenia, so just north of Croatia. Beautiful, beautiful country, very green country, and some amazing, scenery, but also, for instance, some amazing like caves. I went to 2 caves there. One is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The first one, you get in a train and you go into the mountain, like a mile into the mountain, and it's wonderful cave. And so we got to the second one, and we could kind of come in the back door, and I thought, well, this is okay. It's not as good as the last one was. And then you open up into the main chamber, and it's an underground river with a bridge hanging over it with mist rising up from it. You felt like you were out of the Lord of the Rings and the Mines of Moria. It was just an amazing, jaw-dropping place. So not enough people go to Slovenia. Both of those countries are as good to go to as Croatia, and Croatia's great.
Nice. And there you have it. That was the people's poll. Chris, if people wanted to follow you on social media or check out your podcast, how would they do that?
You can go to amateurtraveler.com or find me, Amateur Traveler, wherever fine podcasts are given away for free.
Very nice plug. Very nice plug. We appreciate you being on the show. We're going to go ahead and say good night to the people. Logical Genius, go ahead and start us off.
People, the logic didn't work this time. It did not work this time. And I also think I was slower at sending Chris money through Venmo than HLS was.
Why didn't get
So
yours?
that's my reasoning for losing. But thank you, Chris, for being on the show. Appreciate the knowledge you shared. And listeners, we'll get them next time.
Chris, considering that Logical Genius and HLS was so similar except for 2, I find your decision making quite questionable. I thought for sure we were here. I thought when you said, hey, I haven't been to those 3 places, I thought it sparked intrigue. And you were like, you know what? That's the bucket list I want to go with. But it didn't go our way. I appreciate you being on the show. This was such a great recording. Thank you. And good night, people. And HLS and our champion for the week.
Put some respect on my name. Chris, I said it before, I'll say it again. You definitely stepped in the right direction. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a blast.
And Chris Christensen, please go ahead and say goodnight to the people.
Good night, people.